8-17. 2. 11. Her love for her mother-in-law was such that, later, others were able to say that she was better to Naomi than 7 sons. Ru 4. 15. Arriving in Bethlehem at the commencement of the barley harvest, Ruth, in behalf of Naomi and herself, went out to the field to procure food. By chance she lighted on the field belonging to Boaz, a relative of Elimelech, o textoi acute miritra longo. Ruth 829 bling. He awoke and bent forward. Not recognizing her in the dark, he asked, "Who are you?" She replied, "I am Ruth your slave girl, and you must spread out your skirt over your slave girl, for you are a repurchaser." Ruth 3. 1-9. Ruth's actions, in compliance with Naomi's instructions, must have been in line with the customary procedure followed by women when claiming the right to brother-in-law marriage. In Lang's commentary on the Holy Scriptures, Paulus Cassel makes this observation regarding Ruth 3. 9. Undoubtedly this symbolical method of claiming the most delicate of all rights, presupposes manners of patriarchal simplicity and virtue. The confidence of the woman reposes itself on the honor of the man. The method, however, was one which could not easily be brought into operation. For every foreknowledge or pre-intimation of it would have torn the veil of silence and secrecy from the modesty of the claimant. But when it was once put into operation, the petition preferred could not be denied without disgrace either to the woman or the man. Hence, we may be sure that Naomi did not send her daughter-in-law on this errand without the fullest confidence that it would prove successful. For it is certain that to all other difficulties, this peculiar one was added in the present case. Namely, that Boaz, as Ruth herself says, was indeed a goal, a repurchaser, but not the goal. The answer of Boaz, also, suggests the surmise that such a claim was not wholly unexpected by him. Not that he had an understanding with Naomi, in consequence of which he was alone on the threshing floor. For the fact that he was startled out of his sleep, shows that the night visit was altogether unlooked for. But the thought that at some time the claim of Ruth to the rights of blood relationship might be addressed to himself, may not have been strange to him. Even this conjecture, however, of what might possibly or probably take place, could not be used to relieve Ruth of the necessity of manifesting her own free will by means of the symbolical proceeding. Translated and edited by P. Scharf, 1976, p. 42. That Boaz viewed Ruth's actions as being completely virtuous is evident from his reaction. "Blessed may you be of Jehovah, my daughter. You have expressed your loving kindness better in the last instance than in the first instance, in not going after the young fellows whether lowly or rich." Ruth unselfishly chose Boaz, a much older man, because of his being a repurchaser, in order to raise up a name for her deceased husband in her mother-in-law. As it would have been a natural thing for a young woman like Ruth to prefer a younger man, Boaz viewed this as an even better expression of her loving kindness than her choosing to stick with her aged mother-in-law. Ruth 3. 10. Doubtless Ruth's voice must have reflected some anxiety, prompting Boaz to reassure her. "Now, my daughter, do not be afraid. All that you say I shall do for you, for everyone in the gate of my people is aware that you are an excellent woman." The hour being late, Boaz instructed Ruth to lie down. However, both of them got up while it was still dark, evidently to avoid starting any rumor that would cast a bad reflection on either one of them. Boaz also gave Ruth 6 measures of barley. This may have signified that, just a narrative showing how the God-fearing Moabitess Ruth was blessed by Jehovah by becoming part of the unbroken messianic line leading to King David's setting is during the time of the Judges. Writing was likely completed about 1090 BCE. Ruth decides to stay with Naomi and her God, Jehovah. 1-22 Childless and widowed, Ruth and Orpah accompany their mother-in-law Naomi, widow of Elimelech, as she departs from Moab to return to Judah. Dissuaded by Naomi's words regarding the bleak prospects for remarriage, Orpah turns back. Ruth is undeterred. She declares that Naomi's people will otextoi acute miritra longo. Ruth, Book of 830. As 6 working days were followed by day of rest, Ruth's day of rest was at hand, for he would see to it that she would have a resting place. Ruth 3. 1, 11-15, 17, 18. Upon Ruth's arrival, Naomi, perhaps not recognizing the woman seeking admittance in the dark, asked, "Who are you, my daughter?" Or, It may be that this question pertained to Ruth's possible new identity in relationship to her repurchaser. Ruth 3. 16. Later, when the nearer relative refused to perform brother-in-law marriage, Boaz promptly did so. Thus Ruth became the mother of Boaz's son Obed and an ancestress of King David and also of Jesus Christ. Ruth 4. 1-21. Mount 1. 5, 16. Ruth, Book of. This Bible book takes its name from one of its principal characters, Ruth the Moabitess. The narrative shows how Ruth became an ancestress of David by undergoing brother-in-law marriage with Boaz in behalf of her mother-in-law Naomi. The appreciation, loyalty, and the trust in Jehovah that were manifested by Boaz, Naomi, and Ruth permeate the account. Ruth 1. 8, 9, 16, 17. 2. 4, 10-13, 19, 20. 3. 9-13. 4. 10. With the exception of the genealogical listing Ruth 4. 18-22, the events related in the book of Ruth cover a period of about 11 years in the time of the judges, though it is not stated exactly when it was during this period that they occurred. Ruth 1. 1, 4, 22. 2. 23. 4. 13. Jewish tradition credits Samuel with the writership of the book, and it would not disagree with internal evidence. The fact that the account concludes with David's genealogy suggests that the writer knew about God's purpose respecting David. This would fit Samuel, for he was the one who anointed David to be king. Therefore, it would also have been appropriate for Samuel to make a record of David's ancestral background. 1-16. 1, 13. Authenticity and value. That the book of Ruth is historical is confirmed by Matthew's genealogy of Jesus Christ, which lists Boaz, Ruth, and Obed in the line of descent. Mount 1. 5. Compare Ruth 4. 18-22. 1ch2. 5, 9-15. Moreover, it is inconceivable that a Hebrew writer would have deliberately invented a foreign maternal ancestry for David, the first king in the royal line of Judah. The historical record provides background material that illustrates and illuminates other parts of the Bible. The application of the laws involving gleaning Law 19. 9, 10. De 24. 19-22. Ruth 2. 1, 3, 7, 15-17, 23 and brother-in-law marriage to 25. 5-10. Ruth 3. 7-13. 4. 1-13 are vividly portrayed. There is evidence of Jehovah's guidance in the preservation of the line of descent leading to the Messiah and also in the choice of individuals for that line. Israelite women who were married to a man of the tribe of Judah had the possible prospect of contributing to Messiah's earthly line of descent. G 49. 10. The fact that Ruth, a Moabitess, was so favored illustrates the principle stated by the Apostle Paul. It depends, not upon the one wishing, nor upon the one running, but upon God, who has mercy. Row 9. 16. Ruth had chosen Jehovah as her God and Israel as her people, and in his great mercy, Jehovah granted to her a perfect wage in permitting her to become a link in the most important line of descent. Ruth 2. 12. 4. 13-17. Sabbath day. A day set apart by God for rest from regular labors. The Sabbath was given by Jehovah as a sign between him and the sons of Israel. X 31. 16, 17. The Hebrew expression Yom HaShab Bath is drawn from the verb Shah Vath, meaning rest, cease. Ge 2. 2. 8. 22 in Greek. He Mra 2 Sab Bat means Sabbath day. The history of a weekly 24-hour Sabbath observance begins with the nation of Israel in the wilderness in the second month after their exodus from Egypt in 1513 BCE x 16. 1. Jehovah had told Moses that the miraculous provision of the manna would be double on the sixth day. When this proved true, the chieftains of the assembly reported the matter to Moses, and then the arrangement o textoi acute miritra longo. Sabbath day 831 Our system was composed of many types of Sabbaths. The seventh day, the seventh year, the 50th year Jubilee year, Nisan 14 Passover, Nisan 15, Nisan 21, Sivan 6 Pentecost, Ethanim 1, Ethanim 10 Atonement Day, Ethanim 15, and Ethanim 22. That the Sabbath was not enjoined upon any of God's servants until after the Exodus is evident from the testimony of Deuteronomy 5, 2, 3 and Exodus 31, 16, 17. It was not with our forefathers that Jehovah concluded this covenant, but with us. The sons of Israel must keep the Sabbath during their generations. Between me and the sons of Israel it is assigned to time indefinite. If Israel had already been observing the Sabbath, it could not have served as a reminder of their deliverance from Egypt by Jehovah, as shown at Deuteronomy 5, 15. The fact that some of the Israelites went out to pick up manna on the seventh day, in spite of direct instruction to the contrary, indicates that Sabbath observance was something new. Acts 16, 11-30 That there was uncertainty in handling the case of the first recorded Sabbath breaker after the law had been given at Sinai also shows that the Sabbath had only recently been instituted. New 15, 32-36 While in Egypt the Israelites, being slaves, could not have kept the Sabbath even if they had been under such law at the time. Pharaoh complained that Moses was interfering even when he asked for a 3-day period to make a sacrifice to God. How much more so if the Israelites had tried to rest 1 day out of every 7. Acts 5, 1-5 While it is true that the patriarchs apparently measured time in a week of 7 days, there is no evidence that any distinction was made as to the seventh day. 7 was prominent, however, as a number that often denoted completeness. Ge 4, 15, 23, 24, 21. 28-32 The Hebrew word swear-shah-middle.va is evidently from the same root as the word meaning 7. The Sabbath was celebrated as a sacred day to 5. 12, a day of rest and rejoicing for all Israelites, servants, alien residents, and animals, ceasing from all labors. Isra 58, 13, 14. Ho 2, 11. X 20, 10, 34, 21. De 5, 12-15. J 17, 21, 24 A special burnt offering, along with grain and drink offerings, was made, in addition to the regular daily constant burnt offering. New 28, 9, 10 The showbread was renewed in the sanctuary, and a new division of priests took up their duties. La 24, 5-9, 1ch9, 32, 2ch23. 4 priestly duties were not curtailed on the Sabbath. Mount 12, 5, and infants were even circumcised on the Sabbath, if that happened to be their 8th day of life. In later times the Jews had a saying, there is no Sabbath in the sanctuary, meaning that the priestly duties went right on. Joe 7, 22. La 12, 2, 3. The Temple, by Ayadishim, 1874, p. 152. According to rabbinic sources, in the time when Jesus was on earth 3 trumpet blasts at about the 9th hour, or 3 o'clock, on Friday afternoon announced the Sabbath day's approach. At this, all work and business were to cease, the Sabbath lamp was lit, and festive garments were put on. Then 3 more blasts indicated that Sabbath had actually begun. The outgoing division of priests offered the morning sacrifice on the Sabbath, and the incoming division offered the evening sacrifice, both spending Sabbath in the sanctuary. Each one of the divisions would give to the high priest half of its portion of the bread. It was eaten during the Sabbath in the temple itself by the priests who were in a state of cleanness. The heads of the families of the incoming division determined by lot which of the families were to serve on each special day of their week of ministry and who were to discharge the priestly functions on the Sabbath. La 24, 8, 9. Mr. 2, 26, 27. The Temple, pages 151, 152, 156-158. There was a distinction in requirements for the regular weekly Sabbath and the Sabbaths or holy conventions that were connected with the festivals. 23. 20 Textoi acute miritra longo. Sabbath day 832 Husband when she requested permission to go to see Elisha, the man of God. Why are you going to him today? It is not a new moon nor a Sabbath. 2 Kai 4. 22, 23 And Levites who were scattered throughout the land doubtless took advantage of the Sabbath to teach the law to the people of Israel. 33. 8, 10. 10. 11. It was important for individual Israelites to remember to keep the Sabbath, because violation was regarded as rebellion against Jehovah and was punished by death. Acts 31. 14, 15. New 15. 32-36 The same principle applied to the nation. Their observing the entire Sabbath system, days and years, in a wholehearted way was a vital factor to their continued existence as a nation on their God-given land. Their failure to honor the Sabbath laws contributed largely to their downfall and the desolation of the land of Judah for 70 years to make up for the Sabbaths violated. 26. 31-35. 2ch 36. 20, 21. Rabbinic Sabbath restrictions. The Sabbath was originally intended to be a joyous, spiritually upbuilding time. But in their zeal to distinguish themselves from the Gentiles as much as possible, the Jewish religious leaders, especially after the return from Babylonian exile, gradually made it a burdensome thing by greatly increasing the Sabbath restrictions to 39, with innumerable lesser restrictions. These, when compiled, filled 2 large volumes. For example, catching a flea was forbidden as hunting. A sufferer could not be given relief unless death threatened. A bone could not be set, nor a sprain bandaged. The true purpose of the Sabbath was made void by these Jewish religious leaders, for they made the people slaves to tradition, instead of having the Sabbath serve men to the honor of God. Mount 15. 3, 6. 23. 2-4. Mr. 2. 27 When Jesus' disciples picked grain and rubbed it in their hands to eat, they evidently were accused on 2 counts, namely, harvesting and threshing on the Sabbath. Luke 6. 1, 2 The rabbis had a saying. The sins of everyone who strictly observes every law of the Sabbath, though he be an idol worshipper, are forgiven. Not enjoined on Christians. Jesus, being a Jew under the law, observed the Sabbath as God's word, not the Pharisees directed. He knew it was lawful to do fine things on the Sabbath. Mount 12. 12 However, the inspired Christian writings state that Christ is the end of the law. Row 10. 4, which results in Christians being discharged from the law. Row 7. 6 Neither Jesus nor his disciples made any distinction between so-called moral and ceremonial laws. They quoted from the other parts of the law as well as from the 10 Commandments, and considered all of it equally binding on those under the law. Mount 5. 21-48. 22. 37-40. Row 13. 8-10. Just 2. 10, 11 The scriptures plainly state that Christ's sacrifice abolished the law of commandments consisting in decrees, and that God blotted out the handwritten document against us, which consisted of decrees. And he has taken it out of the way by nailing it to the torture stake. It was the complete Mosaic law that was abolished, blotted out, taken out of the way. F2. 13-15. Col 2. 13, 14 Consequently, the whole system of Sabbaths, be they days or years, was brought to its end with the rest of the law by the sacrifice of Christ Jesus. It explains why Christians can esteem one day as all others, whether it be a Sabbath or any other day, with no fear of judgment by another. Row 14. 4-6. Col 2. 16 Paul made the following expression concerning those scrupulously observing days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you, that somehow I have toiled to no purpose respecting you. 4. 10, 11. After Jesus' death, his apostles at no time commended Sabbath observance. The Sabbath was not included as a Christian requirement at Acts 15, 28, 29, or later. Nor did they institute a new Sabbath, a day of the Lord. Even though Jesus was resurrected on the day now called O Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Sabbath year 833, desisting from creative works with respect to the earth, as described in Genesis chapter 1. The Apostle Paul shows in Hebrews, chapters 3 and 4, that the Jews in the wilderness failed to enter into God's rest, or Sabbath, because of disobedience and lack of faith. Heb 3. 18, 19. PS 95. 7-11. New 14. 28-35. Those who did enter the promised land under Joshua experienced a rest, but not the full rest to be enjoyed under the Messiah. It was only typical, or a shadow of the reality. Jos 21. 44. Heb 4. 8. 10. 1. However, Paul explains, there remains a Sabbath resting for the people of God. Heb 4. 9. Those who are obedient and exercise faith in Christ thereby enjoy a Sabbath resting from their own works by means of which they formerly sought to prove themselves righteous. Compare 10. 3. Thus Paul shows that God's Sabbath, a rest, was still continuing in his day, and Christians were entering into it, indicating that God's rest day is thousands of years long. Heb 4. 3, 6, 10. Lord of the Sabbath. While on earth, Jesus Christ referred to himself as Lord of the Sabbath. Mount 12. 8. The literal Sabbath day, which was meant to bring the Israelites relief from their labors, was a shadow of the things to come, but the reality belongs to the Christ. Col 2. 16, 17. In connection with those things to come, there is a Sabbath of which Jesus is to be the Lord. As Lord of Lords, Christ will rule all the earth for 1,000 years. Re 19. 16. 20. 6. During his earthly ministry, Jesus performed some of his most outstanding miraculous works on the Sabbath. Luke 13. 10-13. Job 5. 5-9. 9. 1-14. This evidently shows the kind of relief that he will bring as he raises mankind to spiritual and physical perfection during his coming millennial rule, which thus will be like a period of Sabbath rest for the earth and mankind. Re 21. 1-4. Sabbath day's journey. Seed journey. Sabbath year. The 7th in each cycle of 7 years. During this year, in ancient Israel the land was allowed to rest, lying uncultivated, and fellow Hebrews were not pressed for payment of debts. Counting from 1473 BCE, the year that Israel entered the Promised Land, a Sabbath year was to be celebrated at the end of every 7 years, actually on every 7th year. The 15. 1, 2, 12. Compared 14. 28. The Sabbath year evidently began with the trumpet blast on Ethanim Tishri 10, the Day of Atonement. However, some hold that, while the Jubilee year started with the Day of Atonement, the Sabbath year started with Tishri 1. There was to be no cultivating of the land, sowing, or pruning, nor any gathering in of the crops grown, but what grew of itself was left in the field, open to the owner of the field as well as to his slaves, the hired laborers, and the alien residents to it. It was a merciful provision for the poor and, additionally, for the domestic animals and wild beasts, as these would also have access to the produce of the land during the Sabbath year. La 25. 1-7. The Sabbath year was called the year of the release #Shemit. The 15. 9. 31. 10. During that year the land enjoyed a complete rest,